The coffee on the table had gone cold, but my boss's words cut deeper, sharper. "We're done with you, Julian." I smiled, but in my mind, a hidden key was already turning. I sat across from Victor Kane, CEO of Felix Corp., in a sleek Chicago boardroom. The river outside sparkled through towering windows, mocking the storm brewing inside me. 12 years. 12 years of my life poured into this company, building their cybersecurity from nothing. Every firewall, every encryption protocol, every sleepless night saving them from disaster. And now, Victor leaned back in his leather chair, his eyes glinting with smug certainty. "We're bringing in someone more cost-efficient," he said, his voice smooth as polished steel. "It's just business, Julian. Nothing personal. Business." The word landed like a slap. My jaw tightened, but I kept my face neutral. Personal or not, it was betrayal. The board members around the table stared at their laptops or out the window, anywhere but at me. Cowards. Not one of them would meet my gaze. They knew what this was. They knew I was the one who kept Felix standing, the one who stopped hackers in their tracks when their systems screamed for mercy. And they were tossing me aside for a cheaper model. I swallowed the bitterness rising in my throat. "When does this take effect?" I asked, my voice steady despite the fire in my chest. Victor's lips curled slightly, like he was savoring the moment. "We'll need you for 10 days to train your replacement. Get them up to speed. After that, we'll settle your severance." Train my replacement. The audacity of it burned. They didn't just want me gone. They wanted me to hand over my work, my legacy, like it was nothing. I nodded once, slow and deliberate. "Thanks for the heads up," I said, standing. My shoes clicked against the polished floor as I walked to the door, each step measured, controlled. If they thought I'd beg or break, they didn't know me at all. Victor's voice followed me, dripping with fake gratitude. "We value your contributions, Julian. Truly. But progress waits for no one." I didn't turn back. My hands clenched into fists in my pockets, but my mind was already racing, sharp and focused. They thought they held all the cards. They were wrong. The elevator ride down felt like sinking into a void. 12 years of loyalty, of carrying this company on my back, reduced to a single conversation. I could still see Victor's smirk, hear the silence of the board. My chest tightened, not with sadness but with something fiercer. Resentment. Clarity. They thought I was replaceable, just another line item to cut. But they had no idea what I held in my hands. I stepped into the Chicago wind, the city humming around me, oblivious to the shift in my world. My phone stayed quiet in my pocket, but my thoughts were loud, relentless. Felix ran on my systems, my architecture, my safeguards. And years ago, I'd made sure of one thing: I controlled the master key to their cybersecurity framework. Not them. Me. The realization hit like a jolt of electricity. I stopped on the sidewalk, my breath steadying. They had severed their lifeline without even knowing it. 2 paths lay before me. I could fight for my job, grovel for their approval. Or I could let them choke on their own arrogance. The second option felt right. It felt like justice. My pulse slowed, my mind sharpening. I wouldn't act rashly. No outbursts, no mistakes. I'd play their game for 10 days, let them think they'd won. Then, when they least expected it, I'd pull the plug. Not out of spite, but because they deserved to learn what happens when you discard the one person holding your empire together. As I walked toward the L train, a memory flashed, a late-night call 3 years ago, when a breach nearly crippled Felix. I'd worked 36 hours straight, patching vulnerabilities while Victor slept in his penthouse. He'd sent a bottle of cheap whiskey as thanks. That bottle still sat unopened in my apartment, a reminder of how little he valued me. Now, that memory fueled me. They wanted a cheaper option? Fine. They'd see what cheap really cost. Before we dive deeper into this high-stakes story, let us know where you're tuning in from. And if you're hooked, hit that subscribe button to support us. I reached my station, the train's rumble matching the resolve hardening inside me. Victor thought he was untouchable, sitting in his corner office, plotting his next move. But I was already 3 steps ahead. By the time he realized his mistake, Felix would be on its knees, and I wouldn't lift a finger to save them. The city lights bled through my apartment window, casting jagged shadows across my desk. I sat there, laptop open, the glow illuminating a truth Felix Corp had forgotten. I held the key to their survival. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, steady, deliberate. 12 years of loyalty had ended in a cold boardroom, but tonight, I was rewriting the ending. The loop was alive outside Chicago's pulse, thrumming through concrete and glass. My apartment, a small haven in the chaos, felt different now. Quieter. Sharper. The betrayal from Victor Kane and his spineless board still burned, but it no longer clouded my thoughts. It focused them. I pulled up a folder buried deep in my private cloud, labeled contingency. Inside were the legal documents I'd drafted years ago, back when I first built Felix's cybersecurity framework. A contract, clean and ironclad, stating I retained sole control over the system's core protocols unless explicitly transferred. No transfer had ever happened. Victor, in his arrogance, never bothered to check. I leaned back, exhaling slowly. The weight of that truth settled into my bones. Felix's entire operation, their client data, their financial pipelines, their defense against the wolves of the dark web, all rested on my architecture. Without my key, they were defenseless. A single command could lock them out. But I wouldn't move yet. Rashness was for amateurs. I had 10 days to play their game, to let them bask in their illusion of victory. Then, when the handover was done, I'd pull the plug. Not to destroy them, but to let them drown in their own hubris. My phone buzzed on the desk, snapping me out of my thoughts. An email from Rachel, a former colleague who'd left Felix last year. Her message was short, but it hit like a fist. Heard about your exit, Julian. They're replacing you with some kid fresh out of school. Victor's bragging about saving millions. Be careful. I stared at the screen, my pulse quickening. A kid. Not just anyone, but someone green, untested, hired for a paycheck they could afford to cut corners on. The insult stung deeper than Victor's words in the boardroom. They thought my work, my craft, could be handed off to a novice. My jaw clenched, but I forced myself to breathe. Rachel's warning wasn't just gossip. It was fuel. I closed the email and returned to my documents, scanning the fine print I'd memorized long ago. Ownership of the cybersecurity framework remains with the original architect unless a formal transfer is executed. Every clause was a brick in the wall I'd built to protect myself. Men like Victor never read the details. They saw numbers, not systems. They saw costs, not consequences. That was their mistake. My advantage. My fingers moved now, drafting the revocation request. One submission, timed for the morning after my final day, would sever Felix's access. Legally. Cleanly. No sabotage, no hacking. Just the natural fallout of their own choices. I pictured Victor in his penthouse, sipping bourbon, oblivious to the cliff he was walking toward. The board nodding along like puppets, assuming their empire was untouchable. They had no backup plan. No contingency. I was their contingency, and they'd thrown me away. A memory flickered, unbidden. 2 years ago, a zero-day exploit had torn through Felix's servers. I'd caught it by chance, working late, my eyes burning from hours of code. 30 minutes later, and millions in client funds would have vanished. Victor had sent an email the next day. Solid work, Julian. Keep it up. No call, no meeting, just a pat on the head like I was a loyal dog. That email was still in my inbox, a reminder of how little I meant to them. Now, it sharpened my resolve. They didn't deserve my mercy. I stood, stretching my arms, the city's hum filling the silence. My plan was set, but a new tension coiled in my chest. What if the kid, this replacement, got caught in the crossfire? I shook my head, dismissing the thought. This wasn't about him. It was about Victor. About the board. About a company that thought loyalty was a one-way street. Still, the doubt lingered, a faint crack in my certainty. I pushed it down. Justice wasn't always clean, but it was necessary. I returned to my laptop, encrypting the revocation file. One click, and it would sit dormant until the moment I chose. My coffee mug, cold from earlier, sat beside me, a silent witness to the shift inside me. I wasn't angry anymore. I was precise. Calculated. They wanted to play chess, but I'd already moved my pieces. In 10 days, Felix would learn what happens when you sacrifice your king. I shut the laptop, the screen's glow fading to black. Tomorrow, I'd walk back into that office, smile, and play my part. Victor would see a defeated man, a cog turning quietly until it stopped. He wouldn't see the storm coming. Not until it was too late. I stepped off the L train into Chicago's morning rush, the city's pulse sharp against my skin. Felix's corpse glass tower loomed ahead, a monument to arrogance I was about to unravel. My laptop bag hung heavy on my shoulder, carrying the weight of a plan now locked in motion. 10 days to play their game, to wear the mask they expected. Then, the key I'd buried would turn, and their empire would tremble. The office buzzed with artificial normalcy as I walked through the open plan floor. Developers typed furiously, phones rang, but eyes darted away when I passed. Word of my exit had spread, a quiet poison in the air. They knew I was a dead man walking, a relic Felix was discarding. I felt their pity, their unease, but it didn't touch me. My focus was razor sharp, honed by the documents I'd prepared last night. The revocation request sat encrypted, timed to strike when my handover ended. Until then, I'd be the perfect employee, invisible until the moment I wasn't. My old office waited at the end of the hall, but it wasn't mine anymore. Marcus, my replacement, sat at my desk, his fingers fumbling over my keyboard. He was young, barely past his mid-20s, with a nervous smile and a cheap blazer that screamed first job. He stood when I entered, offering a handshake that felt more like an apology. "Julian, good to meet you," he said, his voice too eager. I nodded, shaking his hand, my expression neutral. He wasn't the enemy, just a pawn in Victor's game. Still, seeing him in my chair, clicking through my systems, twisted something deep in my gut. I spent the morning walking Marcus through the basics of Felix's cybersecurity framework. Firewalls, intrusion detection, encryption layers. His eyes glazed over as I explained the architecture I'd built, the one that kept Felix's clients safe from chaos. He scribbled notes, nodding too fast, but I could tell he was drowning. This wasn't a system you learned in 10 days, not with a diploma still fresh off the printer. I kept my tone even, professional, but inside I saw the truth. Marcus was a bandage on a wound Felix didn't even know it had. The office hummed around us, but tension clung to every glance. A senior developer, Sarah, passed by and gave me a tight nod, her lips pressed in. She'd been at Felix almost as long as I had, but like the others, she kept her distance. Nobody wanted to be seen with the man on his way out. I understood. Victor's shadow was long, and loyalty was a risk no one could afford. Still, their silence fed the resolve burning inside me. They'd all see soon enough. Midday, Marcus leaned back, rubbing his eyes. "This is intense, man," he said, laughing nervously. "Victor told me to simplify things, you know? Cut out the extra layers to save on server costs." I froze, my hand pausing over my mouse. Simplify. The word was a spark in a room full of gasoline. Felix's system was a fortress because of its complexity, every layer a shield against attacks. Stripping it down was like leaving the front door unlocked in a war zone. I looked at Marcus, his face open, oblivious to the disaster he'd just revealed. "Victor's orders," he added, shrugging, as if it was nothing. My pulse spiked, but I forced a nod. "Got it," I said, my voice calm while my mind raced. Victor wasn't just replacing me, He was gambling with the company's survival to pinch pennies. The recklessness of it, the sheer stupidity, hit me like a wave. This wasn't just betrayal. It was sabotage of his own making. For a moment, I wondered if I should warn Marcus, give him a chance to brace for the fallout. But I stopped myself. He'd learn the hard way, just like Victor would. Victor summoned me to his office before lunch. He sat behind his desk, skyline sprawling behind him, his posture relaxed, smug. "Progress report, Julian," he said, his eyes flicking over me like I was a minor inconvenience. I stood tall, meeting his gaze. "Marcus is catching up," I said, keeping it vague. Victor smirked. "Good. I knew you'd stay professional." His confidence, blind and bloated, almost made me laugh. He had no idea the blade I'd hidden was already at his throat. I left his office, my steps steady, but Marcus's words echoed. "Simplify." They were dismantling my work before I'd even walked out the door. Back at my desk, I opened my laptop, checking the encrypted revocation file one last time. Tomorrow, I'd play the same role, teacher, guide, ghost. But each day brought Felix closer to the edge. When the 10th day ended, my key would turn, and their fortress would crumble. That night, I walked home through Chicago's chill, the river reflecting lights like scattered promises. My plan was flawless, but a shadow of doubt crept in. Would Marcus be blamed when the system failed? Would Sarah and the others suffer for Victor's sins? I pushed the thoughts away, my breath fogging in the air. This was justice. It had to be. The Chicago dawn broke gray and heavy, but my apartment felt alive with purpose. I sipped coffee, laptop open, as the clock ticked closer to chaos. At precisely 6 a.m., the encrypted revocation I'd prepared went live. Felix Corp's cybersecurity framework, the spine of their empire, was no longer theirs. My key had turned, and now I waited, calm and certain, for their world to unravel. By 8, my phone buzzed with the first alert. System failure detected. Client portals offline. I leaned back, the city's hum a faint backdrop to the storm I'd unleashed. Not sabotage, not revenge, but justice, clean and legal. Felix had bet on a cheaper future, and I'd let them see the cost. News apps lit up with headlines. Felix Corp grapples with massive outage. Clients locked out. I scrolled through the reports, my pulse steady. Right on schedule. The office would be a war zone now. I pictured developers scrambling, their screens flashing errors they couldn't fix. Marcus, my replacement, would be hunched over my old desk, his inexperience a weight he couldn't carry. Victor Kane, the untouchable CEO, would pace his corner office, his smugness crumbling. I felt no urge to gloat, only a quiet satisfaction. They'd built their tower on my work, then thought they could erase me. This was the consequence. My phone rang at 9:15. Victor's assistant, Claire, her voice tight with panic. "Julian, we need you," she said, words tumbling over each other. "Everything's down. Client data, transactions, all of it." I stared out my window, the Chicago River glinting below. "That's unfortunate," I said, my tone even. "But I'm not your employee anymore." She stammered, something about IT tracing a licensing issue, but I ended the call. Her desperation was theirs, not mine. The news grew louder. Felix stock plummets 45%. Investors flee amid system collapse. I refreshed my feed, watching the numbers spiral. Clients were pulling contracts, their trust shattered. Then, a new alert caught my eye. Minor data leak detected at Felix Corp. My stomach tightened. The leak wasn't my doing, but Marcus's talk of simplifying the system flashed in my mind. Victor's orders had left them vulnerable, and now cracks were forming. I exhaled, pushing down a flicker of guilt. This wasn't on me. I'd locked them out, yes, but their negligence had opened the door to worse. Still, I thought of Sarah, the developer who nodded to me yesterday, and others caught in the fallout. The thought stung, but I buried it. Justice had a price. Victor called at 10:30. I let it ring, once, twice, 3 times, savoring the silence between. On the 4th, I answered. Julian, he said, his voice strained, no trace of the arrogance I'd faced 10 days ago. We can fix this. Come back. I'll quadruple your salary. Give you equity. My lips curved, not a smile but something colder. You don't get it, Victor, I said, my words slow, deliberate. You thought I was expendable. Now you're learning I was the foundation. He tried to interrupt, his tone shifting to pleading. I cut him off. You needed me, Victor. I never needed you. I hung up, the finality of it settling like dust. I stood, stretching, the city sprawling beyond my window. Felix wasn't just failing, it was imploding. Social media erupted with speculation. Did Felix fire the wrong guy? Karma hits hard. Commenters tore into Victor, their words sharp and unforgiving. I didn't linger on them. The victory wasn't in their noise but in the silence of my phone, now free of Felix's grasp. I'd done what I set out to do. Let them burn themselves down. By noon, the leak escalated. A hacker group claimed credit, exploiting the gaps Marcus had been told to create. Felix's name trended for all the wrong reasons, lawsuits piling up like kindling. I sat back at my desk, the coffee cold again. Part of me wanted to feel nothing, to let the chaos unfold without me. But the leak gnawed at me, a reminder of how far Victor's recklessness had spread. I hadn't caused it, but I'd cleared the path. For a moment I wondered if I'd gone too far, if the collateral damage would haunt me. Then I remembered Victor's smirk, the bored's silence, the years I'd been invisible. No. They'd chosen this. My inbox pinged with new messages, not from Felix but from others. A competitor's CTO, offering a partnership. A startup, begging for a consultation. My name was spreading, not as a casualty but as a force. I didn't reply, not yet. The world could wait. I opened a news video, Victor at a press conference, his tie loose, eyes hollow. We're addressing the issue, he said, but his voice cracked, betraying him. A reporter pressed him. Is this tied to Julian Hayes' departure? Victor's jaw tightened. No comment. I shut the video off. He didn't need to say it. The truth was screaming louder than he ever could. I walked to my kitchen, pouring fresh coffee, the mug warm in my hands. Felix was bleeding out, and I hadn't lifted a finger today. The leak was their fault, the outage mine, but the collapse? That was all them. My phone buzzed again, Claire's number. I ignored it. Then another call, from a board member. I let it die. They wanted a savior, but I wasn't theirs anymore. I'd been their shield, their architect, their contingency. Now I was their reckoning. The afternoon stretched on, headlines piling higher. Felix faces class action suits. Stock hits decade low. I closed my laptop, the glow fading. Tomorrow, Victor would wake to a company in ruins, his legacy ash. I'd wake to something else, something new. Freedom, maybe? Or the chance to build again, on my terms. Chicago's skyline glittered outside, vast and unyielding. I played my hand, and the table was mine. Chicago's skyline burned gold as the sun dipped low, painting my apartment in hues of possibility. I stood by the window, coffee mug forgotten on the counter, my laptop closed for the first time in days. Felix Corp was no longer my burden. Their calls had stopped, their emails deleted, their empire reduced to headlines screaming failure. I was free, and the weight of that truth felt like wings unfolding. The morning news confirmed what I'd expected. Victor Kane was out, forced from his throne by a board desperate to salvage their sinking ship. A grainy photo showed him leaving Felix's tower, head down, tie gone, a man stripped of his armor. I felt no pity, only a quiet nod to justice served. The lawsuits had snowballed, clients and shareholders demanding millions for losses tied to the outage and leak. Felix's name, once a titan's, was now a cautionary tale, whispered in boardrooms and dissected online. Someone posted a meme, Victor's face over a crumbling castle. I scrolled past it, uninterested. Their ruin wasn't my trophy. My victory was something else, something mine. I stepped onto my balcony, the city's breath cool against my skin. Yesterday's chaos lingered in my mind, the data leak a shadow I hadn't planned. It wasn't my fault, but it had spread faster than I'd imagined, tarnishing Felix beyond repair. A message arrived as I leaned against the railing, not from the board but from Sarah, the developer who nodded to me during the handover. "Julian, you exposed them," she wrote. "They treated us all like dirt." "Thank you?" I stared at her words, a knot loosening in my chest. Others followed, old colleagues I hadn't heard from in years, their gratitude sharp and unexpected. They saw what I'd done, not as destruction but as truth laid bare. For a moment, I wondered if this was enough, if justice could ever be clean. Then I let it go. I'd carried Felix long enough. An hour later, I sat across from a venture capital director in a quiet office downtown. Her name was Elena, her gaze steady, curious. "I'd followed your work at Felix," she said, leaning forward. "What's next for you, Julian?" I didn't hesitate. "I'm building something new," I said, my voice firm. "A cybersecurity firm, lean and honest, where talent isn't a line item to cut." I laid out my vision: no bureaucracy, no greed, just systems that protect and people who matter. Her eyes lit up, and when I finished, she extended her hand. "We're in," she said. "Name your terms." I shook her hand, the deal a spark igniting a future I could shape. Back home, I opened my laptop one last time, pulling up Felix's website. Their stock was a ghost of itself, their logo faded against a backdrop of crisis updates. I closed the tab, then cleared my inbox, every trace of them gone. The city hummed below, alive with chances I'd never seen while chained to their machine. I wasn't the man they'd discarded. I was Julian Hayes, architect of my own path, and no one would underestimate me again. The lesson settled deep. Power isn't money or titles. It's knowing your worth and refusing to let anyone steal it. I'd learned it the hard way, but it was mine now, unbreakable. I stepped back onto the balcony, Chicago stretching endless before me. The past was ash. The future was mine to build. This journey has ended with a rush of emotion. Does this ending satisfy you or catch you off guard? Share your thoughts below. If this story has you craving more, drop a like and subscribe for the next adventure. Thanks for joining me. See you in the next tale.